So our lead this hour is we're going to go to football. Now, we will not avoid the World Series. The Dodgers are the champions. Happy Halloween. A very spooky kind of a night. The Dodgers are the champions of baseball. The Yankees with a great choke job. Loved every boo-boo, everyone by the Yankees. And so we'll continue that conversation, but our lead this hour is from the National Football League. Now, why are we going to the National Football League? Because we know where our bread is buttered. That is why. And we're going to start out this hour. We're going to go to Indianapolis. Interesting story. We follow up what has been a soap opera in that city, the in-depth team coverage of the quarterback shuffle heard around the NFL. Lot of finger pointing in Indy. And if you've not heard the latest, maybe not, the head coach of the Colts, Shane Steichen, says that Joe Flacco will not only be the starter in the Sunday night game against the Minnesota Vikings, but he's going to be the starter for the rest of the season. The move was made because the Colts are in win-now mode. Win-now mode for the Colts. Yep. Now, the streets are talking. I don't know if you've heard what I've heard, but I have heard the following. I have heard that the owner, Jim Irsay, is the one behind this, that Jim Irsay, he was the one that made the calls and sent the messages and said, hey, we got to get this guy Richardson off the field. The guy can't play. That he meddled in football ops for the Indianapolis Colts. So let us discuss the question for the esteemed panel. Is it true that Jim Irsay, the longtime owner of the Indianapolis Colts, meddled with the front office and the coaching staff to bench Anthony Richardson? So I've got focus group, chain gang, and bookkeeping. We'll combine all of these things together, and we are going to make you an old piano, which Jim Irsay will probably buy at an auction, a parlor piano he will buy and then perform at, and there'll be 7 people watching, and he'll be happy. Now, to answer the question, is it true Jim Irsay meddled with the Colts football ops for Anthony Richardson? We obviously don't work for the Colts. We don't know for sure, but all the evidence is pointing that direction, right? It's one of those things. It's like, does manure stink? Yeah, it does, right? And so Jim Irsay's fingerprints are all over this move. It's very reminiscent of when he hired the high school guy to coach the team a couple years ago. I remember from TV. He's like, well, he liked him. Jeff Saturday played for the Colts and had the ear of Jim Irsay, so he's like, all right, we'll put him in. Would it shock you if Jeff Saturday or someone else reached out to Jim Irsay and said, Jim, this guy Richardson can't play. You gotta go with Flacco. And Irsay's like, all right, I'll go with Flacco. And he looks around. You see there's a path to the playoffs. The AFC South, if you look around, the Titans are a joke. Jacksonville's terrible. Houston has a sexy record. However, some weak spots. We'll see them on Thursday Night Football against the Jets. They're actually an underdog. Did you know that the Texans are an underdog against the Jets in that game? Gambling line? Now, Jim Irsay knows that Joe Flacco, in the recent past, led a team to the playoffs, the Cleveland Browns. Had that glorious run last season where they won a bunch of games at the end of last year on a playoff run a year ago, and then got smoked by the Texans in the playoffs. And Irsay, at this point, you think about if you owned a team. I know this is how I would operate if I owned a professional sports team, and it was my passion. Jim Irsay's worth $4.8 billion, all because he won the genetic lottery, and he happened to be born to a father that made all that money, the family wealth. So Jim Irsay does not need a blue ribbon panel. There's no need for a blue ribbon panel to tell how to run the team. There's no need for that. The nerds are not in charge of the Colts. They're not. They have nerds that work there, but they're not in charge. They're not. Jim Irsay is a one-man focus group. He is. Jim Irsay is a one-man focus group. Now, we would be shocked if he wasn't behind this, right? Everything points that direction. And why would he not be? He wants a winner. He's getting a little antsy. The Colts haven't been particularly good in a while. And it's like, well, what are we doing here? Went out to lunch with some former players, had like a 3-martini lunch somewhere, and there you go. Who knows? Now, as for the idea that is being spread that Anthony Richardson is guaranteed to return next season as QB1 in Indianapolis, I would say that is wash. That is hogwash. There are no guarantees. When you fall out of the bubble of trust, it's very difficult to get back in the bubble. And make no mistake, Anthony Richardson, and I have no skin in the game, is on the outside of the bubble. Right? And you know that the Colts are going to have a wandering eye, and they're going to be on all the dating sites, and they're going to be swiping different directions here, looking around here, playing footsie, trying to find somebody else as their next forever quarterback. It's the way this works. Now, page 2 here. How big a deal is it? How big a deal is it that Indy players such as Michael Pittman, the wide receiver, learned that Anthony Richardson had been removed, was being benched through social media? So it's got a lot of attention. It always gets headlines when people in sports learn of something like this via social media. And I have the same reaction. Who the F cares? It's irrelevant, right? Why is this still a thing? I'll give you a deal. Over the last 10 years, players have been traded, coaches have been fired, and you know what has happened? Many of those stories broke on social media. And that's how people learned about those transactions on social media. So who cares? In fact, 15 years ago, Fox Sports Radio whacked me. They fired me. They got rid of me. I was laid off from Fox Sports Radio. It was January 20th of 2009. So I got let go. I was on the air January 19th into the 20th. I knew I was getting fired from social media. It was on social media I was getting let go. I knew it. But you know what? Who cares? I didn't have a problem with it. It's like it doesn't make it any better. Like if your team Anthony Richardson, if you're on that side of the aisle, it doesn't make it any better, right? It doesn't make it any better that you found out face-to-face meeting and all that. And so I look at this and I'm like, all right, I mean, this is how people get their news. It's not that, unless you're like over the age of like 60, this is how people get their news. And so I look at it like the chain gang. As long as Jim Irsay and the Colts followed the chain of command and they let Richardson know and they let Flacco know before they released the news, as long as that happened, that's all that matters. Everyone else, it doesn't really matter, right? You know, stay in your lane, as LeVar Ball used to say back in the day. Every time you change the depth chart, it does not warrant a Zoom meeting with the entire roster. It's not the way it works in the real world. It's not. And so if you have a problem with that, that's on you. Now, final point. A number of quarterback apologists have been ranting and raving, complaining. It's not fair that Anthony Richardson, who had the lowest completion percentage in the NFL and was a throwback to the late 70s, early 80s, an archaic quarterback, that Anthony Richardson got benched. It's not fair. Went on and on. And many people pointing in the same direction that the NFL needs a developmental system. So the question, will the NFL actually spend the required funds? Will they spend the required funds to put a minor league system in? So a guy like Anthony Richardson can be drafted and then go play in Muskegon for a couple of years, right? Or who knows where. Beaver Dam, you can go play. So the answer here is all about the bookkeeping. It's all about the bookkeeping. The NFL owners, I was told by somebody in the NFL years ago, the NFL owners tried the NFL Europe But the main reason they did that was not to develop players. They did it because they thought they could make money. They thought that was ground. They could market the NFL, something similar, even though it's a rip-off version of the NFL. They could do that in Europe, and they would make money long term. Instead, the cost became problematic. They didn't make money. They didn't develop that many players. And as far as the but crowd, well, yeah, but what about Kurt Warner? Yeah, but I think Jake Delhomme was in that league. They'll go on and on about that. But there were a handful of players that turned out to be pretty good from that league. But the finances, they futzed around with that. They could not make it work. They ended up bleeding money. And they don't want to bleed money. So the owners, they look at the bookkeeping and they do the risk assessment and the cost-benefit analysis. And has the climate changed? There's a lot of people get on social media like, "Oh, we should have a developmental league," but you don't watch the XFL, the UFL, whatever. All these fugazi leagues that pop up are terrible. And spoiler alert, the NFL minor league would be just as bad. And just because you put the NFL logo on it does not make it any better. It still sucks. It's a bad product. Can you get advertisers? Can you make it work? And the answer has been no. And if the answer ever becomes yes, there'll be a minor league system. But the NFL likes it the way it is. They like the fact that they have a religious revival in late April every year where you draft someone in the first and second round, and they are the savior. They're the Messiah. It doesn't work as well when you draft that player and then send them to Timbuktu. It doesn't work.